The alien girl asked softly. "Why avoid me?" I said. "You scare my heart." Ethan had always been a quiet person. He wasn't shy exactly, but he preferred to keep to himself. The world felt loud sometimes, and people's expectations often made him uneasy. He liked routine. Mornings with coffee at the small cafe near his apartment, long walks through the park in the evening, and evenings spent reading or listening to music. Life was predictable, safe, and comfortable. That was until the day Amara arrived. Amara was different. Ethan first noticed her on a Monday morning, standing at the edge of the office lobby with a small notebook clutched in her hands. She had an unusual presence, one that made people stop and glance twice without realizing why. Her eyes seemed to carry something beyond the ordinary, something deep and quiet that didn't quite belong in the bustling office environment. She wore her hair in loose waves, falling over her shoulders, and there was a grace to the way she moved, almost like she was floating rather than walking.
Ethan felt an immediate pull of curiosity toward her, but at the same time something inside him recoiled.
He couldn't explain it. It wasn't fear of her appearance, but something subtler, an anxiety that stirred in his chest, a warning he didn't know how to name. People were whispering about her already. Some said she was strange, others that she seemed out of place. Ethan didn't like to join in on gossip. He simply observed her from a distance, pretending to focus on his work, yet always aware of her presence. The first time Amara spoke to him, it was like a soft wind brushing against his mind. He was sitting at his desk, his fingers poised over the keyboard, when he noticed her standing quietly by his cubicle. She didn't speak at first, just watched him with a gentle curiosity that made his stomach tighten. "Hi," she said finally, her voice soft and calm. It wasn't loud or demanding, just a quiet question floating in the air. "Why do you avoid me?" Ethan froze.
He had avoided her? Somehow he had without even realizing it.
He opened his mouth, but no words came. His mind raced, searching for an explanation that wouldn't sound foolish. He didn't want to offend her, and yet he couldn't lie either. "You scare my heart," he said finally, almost in a whisper, as if saying it too loudly would make it true in some dangerous way. Amara tilted her head slightly, her eyes still warm and patient, and she smiled. It wasn't a mocking smile, nor one of judgment. It was a smile that seemed to understand things that Ethan had never said out loud, things he didn't even fully understand himself.
Instead of pressing further, she simply nodded as if she had expected that answer all along.
Then, without another word, she walked away, leaving Ethan staring at the empty space where she had been. He felt his chest tighten, a mix of confusion and something else he couldn't quite name. It was fear, yes, but not the kind that kept him safe. It was the kind that made his heart ache in a strange, unfamiliar way. Over the next few days, Ethan tried to ignore her presence, but it was impossible. Amara had a way of appearing at the edge of his vision, noticing details no one else seemed to see. She would smile at small victories he didn't share with anyone, like finishing a tedious report or finding a lost pen. Sometimes she would leave little notes on his desk, small words of encouragement or observations about the office that made him pause and think. People noticed too. Some were curious, others skeptical. They whispered about how she seemed almost too quiet, too observant. Some said she might be lonely, and Ethan, who usually stayed out of office drama, felt a pang of empathy for her. He realized that perhaps her strangeness wasn't something to fear, it was simply different, and yet the fear in his chest didn't completely go away. One afternoon, Ethan found himself alone in the small office kitchen making tea, when Amara appeared again. She leaned against the counter, her notebook in hand, and looked at him with those quiet, thoughtful eyes.
"You like the quiet moments, don't you?" she asked softly. Ethan was startled. How did she know?
He shrugged, unsure what to say. You do, she said with certainty, as if she could read his mind. I can see it in the way you move, the way you breathe when no one is looking. Ethan felt his face grow warm. No one had ever noticed him like that before. Not really. Most people just saw his silence and assumed he was boring or indifferent. But Amara, she saw more, and somehow that scared him even more. To be seen so clearly made him feel exposed, vulnerable, and yet there was something comforting in it too. Days passed, and Ethan's life began to feel less predictable. He would catch glimpses of her around the office or outside on the street during lunch breaks. She would wave or simply smile, and he would feel his heart jump in ways he hadn't felt in years. He found himself thinking about her at odd times, wondering what she was doing, imagining conversations they hadn't had yet. One rainy evening as he walked home, he saw her standing under the dim light of a street lamp, holding her notebook close to her chest. The rain fell gently, creating ripples in the puddles around her feet. She looked almost ethereal in that moment, not quite part of the ordinary world. Ethan hesitated, feeling the familiar tightness in his chest. Part of him wanted to run, to retreat to the safety of his apartment and his predictable routine, but another part of him, stronger than he had realized, urged him to approach. He stopped a few feet away, unsure what to say. The rain made everything feel softer, quieter, and somehow more intimate. Amara looked up at him, and for the first time, she didn't speak. She just waited, patient, expectant, and completely unafraid. Finally, Ethan found his voice. I don't know how to be around you, he admitted, his words trembling slightly. You scare my heart. Amara's lips curved into a small, knowing smile. It's okay, she said softly. I'm not going anywhere.
You can take your time. Ethan felt a strange relief wash over him. She wasn't judging him, pressuring him, or trying to change him.
She was simply there, offering patience and understanding. And for the first time in a long time, he realized that maybe fear didn't have to control him. Maybe it could be something he faced, slowly, step by step. From that evening on, things began to change, imperceptibly at first. Ethan noticed her in small ways, the way she helped a coworker who was struggling, the way she smiled at children passing by on the street, the way she seemed to carry a calmness that made everyone around her feel a little lighter. And although his heart still raced when she was near, the fear started to transform into curiosity, and then into something warmer, something he couldn't quite name but didn't need to label just yet. By the time the first week had passed, Ethan realized that he was looking forward to seeing her, not with expectation or demand, but with a quiet anticipation, like waiting for a familiar song to play on a rainy day.
He didn't fully understand why she affected him so deeply, only that she had.
And in that realization, he felt the faintest stirrings of courage, enough to believe that maybe, just maybe, he could allow himself to step closer. Ethan couldn't stop thinking about Amara. Even when he tried to focus on his work, his mind drifted to her. How she smiled, how she seemed to notice things others overlooked, and how calm and gentle she was, even in a world that felt loud and chaotic. He began to realize that his initial fear wasn't really about her, it was about what she made him feel. For years he had avoided letting anyone see him fully, afraid of being judged, hurt, or misunderstood. Amara had pierced through that wall without even trying. It started with small moments. During lunch breaks, he would see her sitting alone on a bench outside, her notebook open as she scribbled quietly. Sometimes she would look up, catch his gaze, and offer a gentle nod. Those nods were small, but they stirred something inside him. A quiet reassurance that she was aware of him, that she noticed him in a way no one else seemed to.
Ethan wanted to respond, to go over and speak to her, but the fear that had always lived in his chest held him back.
He began observing her more closely, noting the little things that made her different. She didn't rush through life like everyone else seemed to. She noticed the way the wind moved the leaves, the sound of children laughing, the smell of rain on the pavement. She treated ordinary moments as if they were extraordinary, and that fascinated him. Ethan realized that he had never really noticed the world that way. He had been so focused on keeping his life orderly and safe that he had missed so many small, beautiful details. One afternoon, Ethan found himself at the office kitchen again, making tea when he heard the soft sound of footsteps behind him. He turned slightly and saw Amara standing there, holding her notebook. She smiled, that same calm, knowing smile that had unsettled him and yet drawn him in from the very first day. "Hi," she said softly. "Hi, hi," she said softly. "I thought I might find you here." Ethan's heart skipped a beat. He had no idea why she would say that, but somehow it felt familiar, as if she could anticipate his actions. He swallowed hard and managed a quiet, "Hello."
"You always seem so focused," she said, glancing at the tea he was making.
"Like nothing else exists around you." Ethan shrugged, unsure how to explain that it wasn't exactly true. I like quiet," he said finally. "It helps me think." She nodded thoughtfully, as if she understood more than he had said.
"I like quiet too," she admitted. "It's easier to notice things." For a moment, they stood in silence.
It wasn't uncomfortable. It was peaceful. Ethan realized that he had never spent time with someone who didn't feel like a stranger, someone who didn't demand anything from him, but simply existed alongside him. That by companionship was strange, almost unfamiliar, and yet it felt comforting in a way he hadn't expected. Days turned into weeks, and Ethan began to notice that he was looking forward to these small interactions. Began to see her in the hallways, in the elevators, and outside on the streets near the office. Sometimes she would wave, and he would wave back, feeling a flutter of warmth in his chest. Sometimes he would catch her watching him from a distance, and instead of feeling fear, he felt curiosity. He wanted to know more about her, about what made her see the world the way she did. One evening, as the sun was setting and painting the sky in shades of pink and orange, Ethan saw her sitting on a bench in the park near his apartment. She was alone, sketching in her notebook, completely absorbed in her work. He hesitated at first, then gathered his courage and walked over. "Mind if I sit?" he asked quietly. She looked up and smiled, a smile that felt like an invitation.
"Not at all,"
she said softly.
"I was hoping you might." Ethan sat down beside her, feeling awkward at first. He didn't know what to say, but she didn't seem to mind.
She simply went back to her sketching, occasionally glancing up at him as if to silently include him in her world. "What are you drawing?" he asked finally, unable to contain his curiosity. She showed him the page, a delicate sketch of the trees in the park, the way the sunlight fell on the benches, and even the ripple of the water in the fountain nearby. It was simple, but there was a quiet beauty in it that made Ethan feel as if he was seeing the world through her eyes. "You notice things," he said softly, "things I never even think about." She smiled again.
"It's easy when you take the time to look," she replied. Most people are too busy to see. Ethan nodded, feeling a strange mixture of admiration and regret.
He realized how much of life he had been missing while hiding behind routines and safety. He wanted to ask her more, to understand her perspective, but the words seemed to stick in his throat. Over the next few days, Ethan found himself thinking more and more about Amara. He thought about the way she moved through the world with calmness and grace, the way she seemed to notice everything without judgment, the way she had a quiet strength that drew people to her without effort. He realized that she wasn't just different, she was extraordinary, and that thought frightened him more than anything else. He began to notice that the fear he felt wasn't about Amara herself, but about what she represented, a possibility of connection, vulnerability, and emotions he had long avoided. He had spent years building walls around his heart, afraid that letting anyone in would lead to pain. But Amara was slowly dismantling those walls without even trying, simply by being herself. One rainy afternoon, Ethan found himself walking home when he saw her standing under a small awning, trying to keep dry. He approached her, feeling the familiar flutter of anxiety in his chest. "You're out in the rain," he said, noticing that she had no umbrella. She looked up at him, her hair slightly damp from the drizzle, and smiled. "I don't mind," she said softly. "I like the rain. It feels..." Ethan hesitated, then offered. "You can walk with me. I have an umbrella." She accepted, and as they walked together through the quiet streets, Ethan felt a strange sense of comfort. They didn't talk much, but the silence was different now. It wasn't awkward or heavy. It was easy, natural, and somehow healing. He realized that being around her didn't frighten him in the same way it had before. The fear was still there, but it was changing into something else: trust, curiosity, and a desire to be present. As the days passed, Ethan found himself looking for moments to spend with her. He would take small detours to see her in the park, linger in the office kitchen when he knew she would be there, or simply walk through the streets, hoping to catch a glimpse of her. Each encounter, no matter how brief, left him feeling lighter, more aware, and more alive. Amara, for her part, never pushed him. She was patient, giving him space to approach her at his own pace. Her quiet understanding made him feel safe in a way he hadn't felt in years. She didn't demand his attention, but simply existed in a way that invited it. And slowly, Ethan began to realize that his fear wasn't something he needed to fight. It was something he could acknowledge, understand, and move past. One evening, as they sat on a bench in the park watching the sunset, Ethan finally spoke. "I don't know why, but I feel nervous around you," he admitted quietly. Amara looked at him with a calm, gentle expression. "It's okay," she said softly. "You don't have to understand everything right away. Just being here is enough." Ethan nodded, feeling a warmth spread through his chest. For the first time, he realized that connection didn't have to be forced or rushed. It could be simple, quiet, and patient. And in that moment, he felt a spark of hope. A possibility that he could let someone into his life without fear, even if only a little at a time. By the end of that week, Ethan noticed a change in himself. He was more aware of the world around him, more willing to take small risks, and more open to experiencing life beyond his routines. And it was all because of Amara. Her presence, her patience, and her quiet understanding of the world and of him. He didn't fully understand her yet, and perhaps he never would, but he was beginning to realize that it didn't matter. What mattered was the way she made him feel. Seen, understood, and gently challenged to face his own heart. And that realization, though still new and fragile, was enough to keep him moving forward, one small step at a time. Ethan had begun to feel a shift in himself, the walls he had built around his heart, thick and unyielding for so long, were no longer as solid as they had been. Every time he saw Amara, a strange mix of fear and longing stirred within him. It wasn't just attraction or curiosity, it was something deeper, something he hadn't allowed himself to feel in years. She had awakened emotions he had buried, feelings he thought he could control but now realized he couldn't ignore.
It was a quiet Thursday afternoon when Ethan found himself walking toward the park, hoping to see her.
He wasn't sure why he needed to. Part of him feared that if he didn't see her, he would lose the fragile balance he had started to feel. He rounded the corner and there she was, sitting on the bench near the fountain, her notebook open and pen in hand. She looked up and smiled at him. That calm, knowing smile that seemed to say, "I understand, and I am patient."
Hi, Ethan said, his voice uneven despite his attempt to sound casual. Hi, she replied softly. I was wondering when you'd come today. Ethan hesitated, unsure of what to say next. Usually he had a script in his mind, but today his thoughts were scattered.
I wanted to walk, he said finally, feeling the words sound clumsy even to himself. Amara nodded, her gaze steady and patient. Walk with me then, she said. The world looks different when you walk slowly. He joined her on the path, feeling awkward at first, but the awkwardness melted as they walked side by side. Ethan began to notice the small details she always seemed to see. The way the sunlight filtered through the trees, how the water sparkled in the fountain, and even the sound of leaves rustling in the gentle breeze. For the first time in a long time, he felt truly present. As they walked, Amara spoke softly, not asking questions but sharing observations. The pigeons are restless today, she said with a small smile. Perhaps they sense the wind changing. Ethan chuckled quietly. You notice everything, he said. I never even see the pigeons. She looked at him with curiosity. That's because most people don't pay attention. They're too busy thinking about what comes next or what they should do. You're learning to notice. That's why I like walking with you. Ethan felt a warmth in his chest. Her words weren't flattery. They weren't meant to charm him. They were honest and gentle, a reflection of how she saw him without judgment. And in that honesty, he felt both comforted and challenged. He realized that her presence demanded something from him. Not action or confession, but honesty with himself. Over the next few weeks, Ethan began to confront the fears he had long avoided. He noticed that his hesitance to connect with others wasn't just about avoiding pain, it was about avoiding himself. He had built walls not just around his heart, but around his identity, afraid that if anyone saw him clearly, they would reject him. Amara had seen him clearly from the very beginning, and instead of pushing him away, she had remained patient. That realization both terrified and inspired him. One evening, as the sky turned golden with the setting sun, Ethan found himself sharing something with her he had never told anyone before. They were sitting on a park bench, watching children play nearby, and for a moment, the world seemed suspended, quiet, and safe. I've always been afraid, he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. Afraid of letting people in, afraid of being hurt. And I built walls around myself to stay safe. But you make me feel like I don't have to be afraid all the time. Amara looked at him with gentle eyes, not shocked, not judgmental. She nodded slowly. It's natural to be afraid, she said. But fear doesn't have to control you. You can feel it, understand it, and still choose to be brave. Her words lingered in his mind long after the sun had set and the sky had darkened. Generally in dogs and training from a defense's story never brought back any of the tabernacles. Ethan found himself looking forward to see Ewer again.
In noticing the world, even when Baysanda's world was all over. Next step from seeing her back through stories.
He had begun to cherish their walks, their quiet conversations, and even the silence they shared. Each encounter brought a mixture of excitement and anxiety, but the fear was different now. It no longer paralyzed him. It motivated him to engage, to understand, and to grow. At work, he noticed subtle changes in how he approached people. He smiled more, listened more attentively, and allowed himself to participate in conversations he would have once avoided. His colleagues noticed, though none commented directly. Ethan realized that Amara's influence extended beyond their walks and meetings. She was helping him become more present in the world, more open to life itself. One rainy afternoon, as he left the office, he saw her standing under a tree near the street corner, holding her notebook close to her chest. The rain had started lightly, and droplets sparkled in the streetlights. He approached her, umbrella in hand. "You're out in the rain again," he said, unable to hide a small smile.
I like it.
She said softly.
It's peaceful.
You feel everything more clearly. Ethan offered the umbrella. "Walk with me?" She nodded, and together they strolled through the quiet, rain-washed streets. They didn't talk much, but the silence wasn't heavy. It was easy, familiar, and comforting.
Ethan felt a sense of safety in her presence that he hadn't experienced in years.
He realized that the fear he had once felt, the fear of being seen, of being vulnerable, was slowly being replaced with trust. One evening, as they sat on a bench overlooking the park pond, Ethan found himself opening up again. "I don't know why I feel this way," he admitted, "but being around you, it makes me nervous and calm at the same time." "I've never felt like this before." Amara reached out and touched his hand gently. "That's because you're allowing yourself to feel," she said. "Emotions are powerful, but they don't have to be scary. Feeling is living."
Ethan looked at her, really looked at her, and felt a wave of gratitude and admiration.
She wasn't trying to fix him or change him. She wasn't asking for anything in return. She simply existed as a mirror, reflecting his own heart back to him in ways he had long avoided. Days turned into weeks, and Ethan continued to confront the fears and habits that had held him back. He began to notice his own growth. He laughed more freely, shared more openly, and allowed himself to experience moments of joy without guilt or hesitation.
Each day with Amara brought new insights, new feelings, and new courage.
One evening, as the city lights twinkled around them, Ethan realized something important. He didn't have to fully understand Amara to appreciate her presence. He didn't have to have all the answers to his fears or his feelings. It was enough to be present, to engage with life, and to allow himself to be seen. Amara had taught him something profound. Bravery wasn't the absence of fear, it was choosing to move forward despite it. And for Ethan, that choice had become a daily practice, one he was grateful to share with someone who had gently, patiently, and unassumingly opened the door to his heart. The bond between them deepened naturally. It wasn't forced or rushed. They laughed together, shared quiet moments, and explored the world side by side. Ethan began to understand that the fear he had once felt, the fear of being vulnerable, was no longer a wall, but a bridge. And Amara had been the gentle guide, helping him cross it step by step, moment by moment. By the time the season changed, Ethan felt transformed. He was not the same person who had first avoided her out of fear. He had grown, not through grand gestures, but through patience, observation, and the quiet courage to face his own heart. And while he still felt nervous sometimes, the fear no longer controlled him. Instead, it became a companion, reminding him that growth, connection, and love were worth the risk. Ethan realized in the depth of his heart, that Amara's presence was a gift not because she changed him, but because she reflected the best parts of himself he had long forgotten. She had reminded him that life was not meant to be hidden behind walls, but lived openly, fully, and with courage, no matter how small the steps might be. And so, with every walk, every conversation, and every quiet moment shared between them, Ethan continued to move forward. Slowly, patiently, he allowed himself to experience life, to notice the beauty around him, and to feel the depth of his own heart, a heart that, for the first time in a long time, was beginning to beat freely, fully, and without fear. Ethan had come a long way since the first time he had felt his heart race at Amara's presence. The fear that had once held him back, that had made him avoid her, had softened into something different, a quiet courage, a gentle curiosity, and an openness he had never known before. He realized that life wasn't meant to be lived behind walls, and that sometimes letting someone in was the bravest thing a person could do. It was a bright Saturday morning when Ethan decided to visit the park on his own, hoping to find Amara there. He carried a small sketchbook of his own, something he had started in secret over the past few weeks. He had always thought of himself as someone who didn't create art, but watching Amara sketch, he had been inspired to try. The first few attempts were awkward and messy, but as he continued, he found a small joy in capturing the world as he saw it. He rounded the corner and saw her sitting on their usual bench, notebook in hand, her hair catching the sunlight. She looked up and smiled when she saw him. The smile was warm and familiar, the kind that made his chest tighten in the best way. "Hi," she said softly, her voice carrying a calmness that always made him feel at ease.
"Hi," he replied, trying to sound casual but failing. His heart was already racing.
He walked over and held up his sketchbook.
I tried something,"
he said. Amara tilted her head, her curiosity evident. "Show me," she encouraged. Ethan opened the sketchbook and showed her the page. It wasn't perfect, but there was an earnestness to it, a rawness that made her eyes light up.
He had sketched the fountain, the trees, and even the path where they often walked together.
It wasn't as graceful as her drawings, but it had life in it, a reflection of how he saw the world differently now. "This is wonderful," she said, her voice soft but filled with genuine admiration. "You're seeing the world. You're noticing things. And that's what matters." Ethan felt a warmth spread through his chest. Her words weren't just encouragement, they were recognition, a validation of his growth. For the first time, he realized that he didn't need to hide his imperfections, his fears, or even his awkward attempts at art. Being seen by her, truly seen, was enough. They sat together for a while, sketching in silence. The quiet between them was comfortable, easy, and natural. Ethan noticed that he no longer felt anxious or self-conscious around her. He could simply be himself, and she accepted him as he was. It was a freedom he had never experienced before, and it was intoxicating. As the afternoon sun began to dip toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, Ethan felt a sudden courage. He had spent weeks confronting his fears, taking small steps toward opening his heart, and now he felt ready to take the next one. "Amara," he said softly, his voice trembling slightly, "there's something I need to tell you." She looked up at him, her expression calm and patient, waiting without pressuring him. "I like you," he admitted, the words finally leaving his lips after so many silent battles in his mind. "I've been afraid for so long, but I can't hide it anymore."
"Being around you, it makes me feel alive."
"You've changed me, made me see things differently, and I just had to tell you." For a moment, Amara didn't speak. She simply studied him, her eyes reflecting the soft glow of the setting sun. Then she smiled, a smile that was gentle, warm, and filled with understanding. "I like you too, Ethan," she said softly. "I've noticed you for a long time, the way you observe, the way you feel. You're careful with your heart, but that's what makes you beautiful. I've been patient, waiting for you to see yourself the way I see you." Ethan felt a rush of relief and happiness so intense that it made his chest ache. He had feared rejection, feared judgment, feared his own vulnerability, but all of that fear dissolved in that moment. The truth was simple. They liked each other, and that was enough. Over the next few weeks, their relationship deepened naturally. There were no grand declarations or dramatic gestures, just quiet companionship, shared walks, and the gradual unfolding of trust. They discovered new ways of seeing the world together. Ethan found joy in noticing small details, like the way sunlight hit the leaves or the sound of raindrops on the pavement. Amara, in turn, enjoyed his quiet humor and his thoughtful observations, which often surprised her with their insight. One evening, Ethan invited Amara to his apartment. He had cooked a simple meal, something he hadn't done in years. They ate together, laughed together, and shared stories from their pasts. Stories that revealed fears, dreams, and the paths that had led them to this moment. Ethan realized that he was no longer afraid of being vulnerable. He could speak openly, and Amara listened without judgment, with patience and care. As the night deepened, they sat on his balcony, looking at the stars. Ethan felt a deep sense of peace and connection, something he had never experienced before. He realized that fear had not disappeared entirely, but it had changed. It had become a reminder of how much he cared, how much he had grown, and how much he valued this connection. "Do you ever think about the future?" Amara asked softly, her eyes reflecting the starlight. Ethan thought for a moment. "I do," he admitted. "I used to be afraid of it, afraid that things would go wrong. But now, I think about it differently. Want to see where life takes us, together." She smiled, resting her head gently on his shoulder. "I'd like that," she said. "Whatever comes, we'll face it together." Ethan felt a warmth spread through him, a combination of relief, joy, and hope. He realized that love, trust, and connection weren't about perfection. They were about patience, understanding, and the courage to face the unknown. Amara had shown him that. She hadn't forced him, hadn't rushed him, hadn't tried to change him. She had simply been there, offering a steady presence and a gentle heart. In the weeks that followed, Ethan and Amara continued to explore life together. They discovered new cafes, walked through quiet streets at night, and shared moments of silence that felt full and meaningful. Each day brought new insights, laughter, and small victories, like completing a sketch, sharing a story, or simply sitting together in peace. Ethan noticed changes in himself beyond his relationship with Amara. He was more open with colleagues, more willing to engage with friends, and more confident in expressing his thoughts and feelings. The fear that had once controlled him no longer dictated his actions. He understood now that fear was not an enemy, but a guide, a signal that something mattered deeply, that taking risks could lead to growth, and that embracing vulnerability could lead to profound connection. One rainy morning, Ethan and Amara found themselves caught in a sudden shower while walking through the park. Instead of running for cover, they laughed and ran through the puddles together, splashing water and enjoying the moment. The rain, which had once seemed intimidating and uncomfortable, now felt like a shared adventure. Ethan realized that life, like the rain, could be unpredictable and messy. But it could also be beautiful and joyous when shared with someone who truly understood you. As the months passed, Ethan's bond with Amara grew stronger. He no longer felt the need to hide or protect himself from the world. He had learned that love and connection were not weaknesses, but strengths. He had faced his fears, embraced his emotions, and discovered a part of himself that he had long ignored. Mara had been a catalyst, but the growth was his own, earned through courage, patience, and openness. One evening, as they sat by the fountain where they had spent so many hours together, Ethan reflected on his journey. He remembered the first time he had said, "You scare my heart," and how true that had felt at the time. But he also realized how far he had come, from fear to understanding, from avoidance to connection, from isolation to love. "Do you remember the first time we met?" he asked softly. Amara smiled, her eyes warm.
I do. You were so cautious, so careful with your words.
But I could see through the walls. And you were patient, Ethan said, smiling. You gave me time, space, and understanding. I never thought someone could do that for me. I did, she said gently. And I always will. Because you are worth it, Ethan.
Ethan reached for her hand, holding it tightly, feeling a deep sense of gratitude and joy.
And you are worth it too, he said. Thank you for showing me what it means to truly feel, what it means to truly feel, truly live. They sat together in silence for a long while, watching the water ripple in the fountain and listening to the distant sounds of the city. For Ethan, the world had changed. Life was no longer a series of routines and walls. It was full of possibilities, connection, and love. And for the first time in a long time, his heart was not scared. It was open, free, and ready for whatever came next.
Ethan realized that some people come into your life not to change you, but to remind you of who you are.
Amara had done that for him. She had helped him confront his fears, embrace his emotions, and see the beauty in the world and in himself.
And in doing so, she had become a part of him, a quiet presence that brought strength, joy, and hope.
As the sun set behind the buildings, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, Ethan held Amara close and whispered, I'm ready. Ready to face life, ready to feel, ready to love. Amara rested her head against his chest, her eyes closed, a serene smile on her lips. And I'm ready too, she said softly. In that moment, Ethan understood something profound. Love wasn't about avoiding fear, controlling life, or hiding your heart. Love was about being present, being vulnerable, and embracing the unknown. Together, and with Amara by his side, he knew he could face anything.